This is Latin American and Caribbean News Now, and thank you another time for joining. And we are continuing in the series of what is happening in Venezuela and the US's decision to invade and to depose the government of Nicolas Maduro. The United States is desirous of carrying out regime change in the country of Venezuela. Now, what are the messages that that sort of activity will send to the region, to the Caribbean, and also to the Latin American region? Now, let's begin with CNN. And CNN did publish a news item on September 1st, 2025. And the title is Trump claims Venezuela's Maduro is a drug trafficking threat to the US. Does the data back him up? That's the question that is being asked. The recent escalation of tensions between Washington and Caracas, which has led to the United States deploying at least 7 warships to the Southern Caribbean, can be traced back to a particular day. On August 7th, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi announced a $50 million reward for information leading to the arrest of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, who has been facing formal drug trafficking charges from the Justice Department since 2020. Bondi declared that Maduro is one of the most powerful drug traffickers in the world and a threat to the national security of the United States. Caracas has always denied these accusations, but within hours, more than 4,000 U.S. military personnel were deployed to Caribbean waters. Days after, more ships, submarines, and aerial intelligence units joined them. Now, there are individuals in the Caribbean and also in Latin America who will be saying, outside of Venezuela, that is, what does this have to do with us? What does this have to do with Guyana? What does this have to do with Jamaica? What does this have to do with Barbados, with Antigua and Barbuda, and all of these countries that are in the region, within the Latin American and Caribbean region? And I would say everything. It has to do with everything, because injustice that is shown to one person is injustice to all. Justice that is denied to one of your brothers or sisters is justice that is going to be eventually denied to you. And that is what we have to understand. Now, we understand that that Nicolas Maduro's Venezuela does not run the drug trafficking trade. The drug trafficking trade is a multi-billion dollar industry, I should say. And a lot of the demand for the drugs we see come out of the United States and Europe. Okay, so that is where the demand is. So if there wasn't a demand in the United States and Europe particularly, we would not have a drug trade. Because in having a trade, you have to have supply and demand. And it is the demand that actually goads the supply, right? So that is what we need to understand. So who is behind the drug trade? And there are many scholars and many books out there, scholarly books out there, who will tell you that the CIA and the West particularly are involved in this drug trafficking, even the Vatican. Even the Vatican, if you read books, you will understand that the Vatican, that we people think is a very religious state. We must understand that the Roman Catholic Church is the religious arm of the Vatican, but the Vatican is largely a political state. Okay, and if you read, you will see that the Vatican is involved in that trade. And when you look at the fact is that many of these countries that, in which, like Colombia, which is a very predominantly Catholic country, Venezuela, also most of these Latin American countries, and you wonder, what is the Vatican saying when they hear all of these things developing? But the Vatican is also working with the United States, those of you who don't know. Now, there's an interesting story coming out of the Guardian newspaper this morning. Emergency CELAC meeting and TNT, that's Trinidad and Tobago, on the Caricom nation to back U.S. presence in the region. So that is the fact that, the government of Kamla Persad Besizer, she is the only Caribbean leader at the moment who is on the side, who is backing the presence of the U.S. warships in the Caribbean waters. That is something that is interesting. Now, she did say, give credit to her, give her props, that Jamaica and Guyana were involved in elections, which they are now finished with, and that is why they were not so much involved in what was happening. They had not made any pronouncements. Now that Andrew Holness has won the election in Jamaica and Dr. Irfan Ali has won his in Guyana, let us see what they will say. and what their pronouncements, if they will ultimately back, which I think they will, the likes of Kamala Persad-Caesar, Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. I think that they have no choice but to back her. In fact, I think that they were selectively chosen by the United States to strengthen the arm of U.S. regime change and agenda within the region. And I don't think that Andrew Holness or Irfan Ali will be opposing that sort of agenda. Now, TNT was the sole Caricom member to back the United States military presence in the region at an emergency meeting of the Community of Latin America and Caribbean States, the CELAC or CELAC. Foreign and Caricom Affairs Minister Sean Sobers said yesterday that CELAC requested a meeting on Monday and sought to draft a communique on behalf of all members condemning the U.S. military presence in the Caribbean. Essentially, what the communique was saying is that the presence of the United States within the region, the military presence, could cause instability, and it could be a threat against, essentially, regional security, Sobers said. He added, they're saying it goes against the tenets of CELAC, which is about disarmament of nuclear weapons and keeping our region of peace and stability. They always talk about peace and stability. At the end of the day, war is what they mean. Remember now that 1984, written by George Orwell, say that war is peace. And in fact, I opened the political paper this morning, the political newspaper coming out of the United States, the online version, in which Trump is about to change the Department of Defense to the Department of War. And it was before the Department of War. Before, after World War II, that was, I think, was under the president of, what's his name, Truman, that they changed it to the Department of Defense. Now, Trump is saying it sounds almost like it's a religious slur to it, saying that, well, the United States won World War I and they won World War II. It means, therefore, and that under that time, during that time period, the Department of Defense was under the Department of War. It was named Department of War. Now, that's going to cost billions of dollars, as the political newspaper suggested, to have that name change and across the world, and to change all of their insignia and everything that they have, all of their institutions. It's going to cost billions of dollars in a time when many Americans are suffering and can't pay their bills. We said, listen, we are not in support of that. We are not in support for these reasons, explaining the reasons for this country's objection. Sobers says we support all of those things, region of peace, stability, but there's no evidence to suggest that the United States intervention against transnational crime will destabilize regional security. There's no evidence to suggest that the US's intervention against transnational crime would cause the region to be a region that does not hold true to the tenets of peace. Now, there is also no evidence to suggest otherwise too, right? And that is what he has to understand. Hi there, fellow. He's saying that there is no evidence. Sorry about that. Yeah, there's no evidence to suggest otherwise, but there's no evidence to suggest that it will not, result in instability in the region. I would say that there is more evidence to suggest that there is going to be instability. Why? We saw the same playbook happening in Iraq and all across the world, in Guatemala, in Chile, right? All around the world. We have seen the same in Bolivia, in Haiti. All right, we see the instability of what U.S. has caused. Every time the U.S. ships or a U.S. government, a U.S.-led government enters a country, all it does, it exports its chaos. Chaos reigns supreme. The same thing happened in Jamaica in the 1970s. Okay? And since that time, Jamaica has not come out of that chaos, that political chaos that she finds herself in. Asked which other countries shared similar sentiments, Sobers said Argentina, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Paraguay, Peru, Panama, and Costa Rica. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio yesterday visited Ecuador to address issues such as transnational crime and drug trafficking. And that is what, now listen to what Marco Rubio is going to say. Guardian Media asked Sobers if it concerned him that TNT stood alone in CARICOM with respect to his support of the U.S. No, it didn't, because we respect everybody's sovereignty. The same way that CARICOM respects our sovereignty when it comes to matters of national security. And this is a national security matter, and our position as it pertains to support in the U.S., CARICOM respects our sovereignty, he said. Now, we must say that on this channel, we are concerned about the increase in crime and violence in the region, particularly in Jamaica, in Trinidad and Tobago, and some people are suggesting also in Barbados. Now, we must look at the root cause of crime and violence. We can't just be reactionary and say because the United States is sending some ships and sending some soldiers that it's going to solve the problem. Because if we do not attack, if we do not do a diagnostic examination of the root cause of the criminal elements, of this transnational criminal elements, then we don't need to talk because we're just reacting. And oftentimes what happens when we react? The problem gets worse. The problem is always worsened when we react to something and we do not think out the situation, we do not examine, scrutinize the root cause of the said problem. Very important that we understand that. And I think that many of us in the Caribbean and Latin American region, we're reacting to what the US is doing rather than assessing the root cause and looking at the historical context of US hegemonic power in the region and in the world at large. It's very important that we understand what I'm suggesting here. Extremely important. Now, so, Marco Rubio is suggesting also that he doesn't care what the United Nations want to say about the United States regime change agenda in Venezuela. He's saying that he's not concerned the least with what the United Nations, has to suggest. Now, let me just say to you here, there are individuals. I was talking to a gentleman on a podcast, and he's out of Barbados, and he was suggesting that the UN is the one that is in charge of everything that is happening in the New World Order. And I wonder what book he has read. He's saying that he's read about this. I would tell him to reread because he has not read fully on the matter. Had he read intelligently, he would have understood that the United States is the military empire of the world, is the military hegemonic power in the world, not the United Nations. In fact, the United Nations sits on the soil of the United States. It means, therefore, that the United States controls the United Nations. It's just a pretense that the United Nations is doing because they know that they are under the jurisdiction of the US. And whatever they say, and they can talk all they want to talk, the US, a lot of times, as we've seen it, particularly since 2001, have always denounced what they're saying and have done what they want to do. We saw that with the war on Iraq and with other subsequent wars where the United Nations have always been pretending as if they are against these wars, when in fact they really aren't. If you look behind the scenes, you will see that they really aren't against the wars that are being waged. And war is a profit. War is an industry. And finally, war is power. And the United States is seeking to strengthen and to cement its global hegemony in the region and in the world at large to be the unmatched, the unparalleled power in the world. It wants to be the new Rome. And George W. Bush did say that. And we have to take them very seriously. Now, as I end the video, I would like to say for those of you who think that the United States is just here to undertake philanthropic work and to ease the Caribbean and the region of, the crime and violence that they're experiencing, right? You need to go and read your history. Because, it was the same George W. Bush after 9/11 took place, that unfortunate event on 9/11 in New York, who said that they are either with us or against us. It means, therefore, whatever the United States does and whatever its ambitions are, whether they are justifiable or unjustifiable, you have to agree or suffer the consequences because you are either with us. And if you're against us, it means, therefore, that you are a de facto terrorist. And this is what is happening. So if prime ministers and presidents disagree with US policy, economic, military, political policies, then you are going to be dubbed. You are going to be described as a terrorist. And that is what is happening to the likes of Nicolas Maduro. And because they control the media landscape worldwide, globally, it means, therefore, that it's going to be hard to stand up to them. and to debunk all the allegations launched at you. I still think, and I would love to know that his days are not being counted or numbered, but I think that the writing is on the wall. That the Nicholas regime, his regime, is about to be transitioned into the likes of a US-led regime, which is going to alter the future of Venezuela and politics in the entire region, the Caribbean, as well as Latin America. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like, share, and subscribe. Like the videos and share the videos and subscribe to the channel so that we can grow and we can provide biting, incisive commentaries on Latin America and the Caribbean region. Thank you so much for joining. See you in another one. Ciao. Adios.